Hello, welcome back to another episode of A Little Atypical. My name is Elijah, but you can call me Lay. Today we are getting right into the topic, so to summarize the inspo, I was with my mom when she was watching the news, and a story came on about people assuming Lady Gaga was pregnant. While I'm not a pop culture girly, I do think it is important to look at these things with a more analytical eye because we can pinpoint where we are at as a society. We are still at the point where people are still passing judgment and making assumptions about people's bodies. And with summer coming up, it is hard to ignore the anxiety that comes along with it. Before I start, I do want to provide a trigger warning for what I want to talk about, because I know the conversations about bodies do trigger people and make some people uncomfortable, but I'm trying to address this as gently and honestly as possible. And keep in mind that I am not a doctor or medical professional, and this is strictly coming from an observational point as a human in society. We will be discussing body changes mainly from the point of going from girlhood to womanhood, lifestyle choices, circumstances, and honestly, just to offer a different approach to the conversation of body positivity, body neutrality, fat acceptance, and so on. So to start off, why does the body change? We can't talk about body image without addressing why the body has a lot of changes in the first place. Most people assume it's solely because of how much you eat and exercise, but there is so much that goes into it, and I'm going to use the example of myself with my journey and the realization when it comes to my weight. Obviously, I don't have to justify my weight gain. Sharing this story is not like a woe is me concept to make people feel bad about it, but simply because I know that a lot of people get so in their own heads about their body image struggles, and this story is just simply to help people feel less alone. The starting point of this story is about a little black girl, me, who took words to heart, and that shaped my entire experience with food and my body. At least for me, as a kid, I never compared my body to the people around me. I maybe recognized that a lot of people were taller than me, but middle school was the time when body image really came to play. The classic story of a black girl going to a majority white school, having a crush on a boy who made it seem like me having a crush or whatever I was feeling for him, because truthfully I didn't even know at the time and I was confused too, was like the most atrocious thing in the world. I'm speaking from an alleged point because obviously it's not like he said this to my face, but other people would just come to me, so clearly it might have been a misunderstanding, but I still took it to heart, because even if he did or did not say that, I think that people even making up that scenario or changing the words still has this effect. And I think that's what people don't understand about their words and how much their words could have influence on someone's lives. With this specific thing, it was that he would never like me because I'm black, fat, and ugly. The complete opposite of him. Allegedly, that was what was stated. And I think on some levels, even at that age, I felt like the only thing I could have control was the fat part. Because, like, obviously I couldn't do anything about being black. That is my race, that's my ethnicity, you know? Like, what can I really do about that? And when it came to ugliness, I feel like I grew up under the mindset that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I couldn't really do anything if someone called me ugly. I mean, what really could I do about that? So fat just felt like the only thing I could have controlled about the negativity I was feeling. I really couldn't control what people thought or said about me. So my anxiety and like my need to control something, anything, really just where it started from. And from that point, I started self-harm tendencies such as starving myself. I'm not going to go too deep into the details because there was a lot of issues surrounding my need of control, but starving myself was just one of many. I would throw away my lunches or bring them back home, hide out in the guidance office during lunch or a teacher's classroom because at that point I really didn't have a lot of friends, or at least that many that were close enough to understand like the true details of the sadness I was just overwhelmingly feeling all the time. The only person who really knew about, I guess, my darkest feelings was my internet friend, and she was like my best friend since 5th grade. I like to call her my twin because her birthday was always the day before mine. So we would joke like, oh yeah, we're basically just twins born at different hours. Even though I don't know the time she was born, but I was born basically almost the 23rd. But yeah, but this is important because I still remember a time when I did eventually have friends in person. We hung out and there was just this misunderstanding while getting Chinese food, mainly because I know I was trying to learn to eat slower because I was in a fixation of trying to figure out how to lose weight. And one of the advices that I found online was like eating slower, and eating out so much wasn't really helping my anxiety around food, but I was also just really happy to finally have friends in person. And there's only so much teenagers can do locally, and the easiest, more convenient option was to just get food together. A friend at the time had the opposite concerns of me because she hated how skinny she was. At the time, I couldn't get it because truthfully, when someone is all you want to be like and they see that trait of themselves as a problem, it's hard to understand it because you're so caught up in your insecurities, your own insecurities. I wanted to put this here to remind people that even when people have the traits you want, it's still very possible for them to have insecurities. Or even if they seem like someone confident, it is very possible for them to still have things that make them insecure. Of course, both of our insecurities were rooted from the same place, which was the perception of how other people saw us. I don't think either of us could have conceptualized how we were morphing other people's perspectives to formulate our reality. She thought her being skinny made her less womanly and she wouldn't be seen as anything more than as like a kid or just a friend because her physique. And I thought me being larger while having a short structure because of all my friends, I was the shortest, was the reason why I went so unnoticed, ignored, and just constantly unseen. To summarize, being a teenager had its own set of problems, and because of the media messaging at the time, I thought the only way for me to be noticed was with the way I looked, because no one seemed interested in me as a human being. Just as long as I was connected to another person, like I mentioned before with that crush, people made me feel like that was like the only thing interested in me if I liked guys or like the type of friends I had around me, but it was never a sole interest in my ideas, my interests, my activities, and just me as my own individual person. But that is a different trauma to unravel another day. So back to the focus on the body. Somewhere along the lines, food, even with my issues surrounding it, seemed like the only way to be connected, have friends, have people around me. And so this is a perspective that I never really see people talk about, of how food and connection could easily become one of the same. In between high school and college, I got into my first relationship, and a lot of our quality time was also centered around food. Same went for spending time with my new college friends when we had a gap in our schedules long enough to grab lunch in between. On the days when my classes were back to back for either 6 hours or 7 hours, the vending machine would be my saving grace. And then COVID happened. So besides the influence of the freshman 15 that we were warned about in our senior year of high school, it was also like COVID 30, you know? And the experience then, after not going to school for maybe about a year and having like all these major changes, because I also changed my major, and when I went back to school, it was a whole different major, and I had to readjust to commuting, readjust to being in person, having to really structure my day and structure my eating schedule so I have enough energy to get through the in-person classes again. I know this may sound like a lot of whining and complaining, but in between the words I'm saying, in between the story, there are so many reasons why our bodies change. I'm just going to highlight it here clearly. Beliefs. For me personally, this was about connection and control. I felt like I had to control what to eat because everything felt so unstable and uncertain, and that I needed one thing. And when I got what I wanted most, which was people to see me, for people to be around me, I had this belief that my presence wasn't enough and there had to be something else there for people to enjoy my company, to have a good time with me. And food was the most affordable option, especially as a teenager and as college students. When you are together in the middle of the day, a lot of activities does point to someone suggesting, let's get food together. And after a lot of thought, I realized I felt food at some point played a huge part in my likability and my ability to connect to both friends, platonic friends, and my romantic partner at the time. This belief that the only way you can connect to people is through food, because it just feels like an easy ground for people. Like if you go out together, you have something to talk about. You talk about if you think the restaurant's good, the atmosphere is good. If it's like a specific place, like ethnic food, you talk about if you want to travel there someday, or wonder like what it would be like, the activities you would do. And that is an easy ground that doesn't revolve so much talking about yourself. That's the thing about food. Like it's just very easy to connect with people through it. And if you enjoy the place, you talk about how maybe you want to come back and try something you didn't try on the menu. It's just a simple way to connect with people, especially if you don't have a belief that you are enough for people to like you. That's what you rely on, other things for people to like you. And sometimes, yes, it is money. Sometimes it's like your style and like all these like blanket things, but it's not necessarily you. And I think that what people don't talk about enough is like the likability when it comes to like getting food, and how easy it is to make sure you connect to people if that's what you crave. Okay, second point I wanted to make is environments and upbringing. So I know that my story mostly focused significantly on my school environment, but family environments also play a huge role. And I know I didn't go that deep into it, but just to paint a bigger picture, I grew up eating a lot of processed food. So like kids' cuisine, banquet frozen dinners, or getting takeout. And it's not so much that my mom couldn't cook. Obviously she did, and I learned to cook from her. I just didn't always like doing it. And I'm talking about when I was really young. I was also a very picky eater. I think for the most part, my mom just wanted me to eat something. And I was, in fact, a very stubborn child. With a single parent, you know, they just do the best they could. And obviously, I'm not an only child, but I was the youngest. So along with that, I also wasn't really active as a kid. I did karate for like a month or two, but because I was kind of like going back and forth, like it's not like I lived there. It was more like a vacation type stay. And so I only really did karate for a summer and I only got up to my purple belt. Throughout childhood, I did dance, but like specifically hip hop dance because I really wanted to. But I don't remember doing that with ages that weren't double digits. Essentially, I was never that kid who was like always active. I think in middle school was the time I really like figured out like kids always had like their extracurriculars and their interests. I was always a kid with more creative interest than physical interest. So as an adult, it's like I kind of have to learn how to be more active, because if you were a kid who grew up with that type of sportsmanship, like you did soccer, you did baseball, softball, volleyball, or any type of sport, you kind of got used to that. And then I never really joined teams in high school because a lot of the teams, well, I wanted to do at maximum cheerleading and did not get into cheerleading. It is what it is. So I just wanted to like add that impact of people having to learn how to be active. I do think I picked up on nutrition a lot easier because at the time I watched a lot of YouTubers cook, and so I was trying recipes a lot, and I did have a huge period of loving cooking. And I started to learn how to cook from when I was about 8. So it's not like that's all I ate, but there was times in my life that it was really regular to have processed food. Third key lesson I want you to take from this is coping mechanisms with change. As I briefly mentioned with changes, I had a lot of changes in my environment, like going from a mostly Black and Hispanic, like a more diverse POC type school, to going to a place where you're the minority. That was like the first big change in my life. Then the next big change was pretty much like when you go from, being single into a relationship, being a loner to having friends, from things seeming normal to COVID existing and changing the way we conduct ourselves in life. I was never that good at coping with change, and with me, my coping mechanisms were either extreme. It's either that I starved myself to have a sense of control, or I just overate everything because I was not thinking and I was so stressed about focusing on something. The whole overeating thing I do think was more prominent during the COVID era. Because I was so focused on wanting to get a job and not really seeing the prospects of the world, and all this anxiety over like my degree, over will I have a job? How do I get a job? How do I keep advancing? That type of pressure. Because the thing is, when you do business, the difference between doing business and doing STEM, even though my last major did have science in it, I basically had to decide, like, do I even want to continue with science? Do I want to do more of a marketing perspective? And just little things. So if you do take the route of wanting to be like a creative with beauty, it's so different than wanting to do a more technical, scientific route. And like with STEM steps, technical steps, I think there's always a clearer path in comparison to being a creative or a copywriter. So I never learned how to have healthy coping mechanisms until I took a minor in integrative wellness, and I was learning that. But even as I was learning that, I wasn't focused so much on my physical health. I was just trying to get my mental health in order. And during the COVID era, I was just very hyper focused on my mental health and my emotional health, and creating and caring about school, and just trying to adjust and cope the best way I could. But I left little room to focus on my physical health. And it was really in, I believe, 2021 when I got COVID. Like, of all the times, I was avoiding COVID, and literally, I got COVID for the first time December 2021 after the semester. And it wasn't from being in school, it wasn't even from going out with people. It was just, I got sick. I got sick on my mom's birthday. We were babysitting, and that's pretty much how I got sick. And that was my experience with COVID, and it was terrible. Fourth thing I would say is poor health education, because especially with things like hormonal health and gut health, obviously those are newer concepts. And I think that if I learned about hormonal changes as much as I did now as an adult, if I learned that like when I was growing up, I feel like all these things that happened to me, like PCOS and stuff like that, wouldn't have been as much as a culture shock, like an internal shock for me. Because yes, I knew that my body will change from girl to woman, and that most likely meant my hips would get wider. My hips did get wider, but also on the stance that I did not grow that much taller. It's just, I feel like the health education really misses key things that girls need to know about. And especially, I was one of the girls who got their periods at 10 years old. And I think it's becoming more common that girls get it younger, because my mom wasn't even prepared for me to get my period that young. She expected me to get it as soon as I was like 13, 14, like a teenager. But I got it, I would say 2 months after turning 10. That sounds about right. Moving on to the fifth thing, which is societal structure and influences. So I didn't really mention this in the story, obviously, but you could have kind of told through how I was talking about how I was operating during college. And I think that I was just trying to prepare myself for what a 9 to 5 would most likely be like, because that's pretty much what I was doing. Like, I had class 9 a.m. to 12. Sometimes I had a class right after again, or I would have a gap and it would be 2 to 5. So I would have about 2 hours to eat lunch. And that was more commonly my schedule. I think about how people maintain health and the difference between when you have a job where you're mostly sitting, and I was in the classroom a lot and we were never really moving around. We would just be sitting listening to lectures. And when you do go into business, that's a more common thing for you to do. Like, you're mostly seated working on projects, you're doing meetings, you're working with people. But my mom has like kind of the opposite type of job. Like, her job requires her to stay on her feet. She's always like moving around. So it was always very easy for her to maintain a healthy weight because her job does include a lot of movement. And I do think that's like the real difference, because no one talks to you about how with certain roles, certain jobs, that you have to take more initiative to be more active and you have to be more intentional. And also with our life structure, because of the 9 to 5 life, unless you're very, very, very good at time management, sometimes you struggle with prepping and having enough time for breakfast to work out and still head to work, go about your day. Sometimes people save their workouts until after work. Some people, they say they're going to go after work, but then they're too tired after a mentally draining day. And when it comes to food throughout their day, they're maybe like eating out because it's a lot more convenient. The last one is not necessarily my story. I mean, I guess in college I was sort of doing that more often or not, because I was very stubborn about spending money on food. It just felt wasteful, and I tried my best to bring stuff from home and eat it before my first class and have like a heavy meal then. That was like my day. And moving on to why the conversation is so hard to talk about things like weight loss, fat acceptance, body neutrality, body positivity, body image in general. I do think a huge aspect of it is people assume the conversation is black and white. And as you can tell with all the things I already mentioned, that it's not. There are activities you do that's not necessarily working out, but it's still movement throughout your day, and that contributes to your movement levels. There's the type of jobs you have and how that affects you. There's hormone issues. There's gut health. There's the difference between losing weight and body recomposition. There's the fact that people hold weight differently. I know that if someone taller than me was my weight, they would hold the fat differently because they're tall. I'm pretty sure I talked to this with my doctor about, but it was a conversation about whether if you're shorter, if it's harder to burn more calories. And then also if you're someone who goes out with a lot of friends and all your friends are taller than you and they eat more than you, and you just feel like you kind of have to keep up. So also like beliefs and like peer pressure and all these like mental things that also contribute to it. Your cortisol levels, it's just so much goes into weight. That's not just about the food itself. That's not just about how much exercise you do. And it's even sometimes about your sleep and your energy and all these like little things, you know? Here's the thing I really wanted to talk about, because I wanted to do a video on basically like summer outfits, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt difficult because of my weight and my body type, and even though I am making the effort and trying like all these like lifestyle changes, trying daily movement now that I guess got used to exercising at minimum 3 days a week. Now I'm trying to incorporate daily movement. It's been going very well so far. I mean, but still, when you don't recognize the changes, it kind of still feels uncomfortable, because sometimes I do think we focus so much on the number, and I'm not even really talking about that because there's so many ways to, I guess, measure or feel happy about it. But sometimes I just struggle when it comes to my body and how I see myself. I also wanted to specifically talk about this because a lot of times I felt uncomfortable with saying like, yeah, I want to lose weight, because on one end, I do think that larger bodies do face a lot of discrimination. I don't think anyone should be judged for their bodies. Let me just preface this by saying, but with the conversation of weight loss, I see what someone wants to do with their body, whether it's they want to gain muscle, whether it's they want to lose weight, whether they want to practice more food freedom because they've been starving themselves their entire lives. Those are all personal goals, you know? And people get upset when people choose what they want to do with their bodies. One thing I forgot to mention about the conversation being so difficult, one thing I feel like people do is they make it a personal attack. And when I think about it, it's like if someone wants to like quit drinking, for example, people take it as a personal attack. Like, oh, you're saying I'm an alcoholic because I drink? They take it the wrong way over someone's choices. Or if someone says, yeah, I think I want to go back to school. Oh, so you're saying I'm dumb because I don't want to go back to school? And that is more of the metaphor and the vibe I was thinking of. And I'm not specifically talking about when it becomes dangerous. So let me just clear that and you can listen to the rest. I remember seeing a video, someone saying like weight loss shouldn't be a goal. And I do think this topic is so hard to talk about because I don't think there's an issue with wanting to lose weight, especially if it's been affecting you. For me, with my weight gain, and I've been trying to lose weight since pretty much the beginning of 2022 and struggling through the process. But at the time, I had to take the train. I would be walking as fast as I could, trying to catch the train on time, and I would be so out of breath. And even though it's still a walk, like the walk is maybe about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. I didn't like how out of breath I felt with every step. I didn't like how heavy I felt, that walking was hard. And whenever my friends wanted to go out, walk, and do something, like during our break, it was kind of hard for me to say yes, because then I knew that I would have to keep up with them. I would have to walk faster. They would make jokes about me walking slower. And everything about my weight, my body, just felt so uncomfortable. My point of confidence also was just not it. But for someone else, that could be their point of confidence. They can be in a larger body and be more confident than they were in a small body. All this to say is, don't let other people's personal goals, don't think of them as an attack on yourself. I do think sometimes we allow ourselves to think what someone else wants to do with their bodies is an attack on us. It may trigger us, but it's not necessarily an attack. Is it that they're actually using shaming rhetoric? Or is it that you feel uncomfortable because just the topic triggers you? And I had to sit with that a lot in my own preference, because yes, on one end, I do believe that it is hard to talk about bodies, because every culture too has their own description of what it is to be healthy, you know? And I do think health, there's so much to contribute with that than just how your bodies look. I also think it's the energy you feel. I think it's the way you can go about your day. And also, if you're going about your day not being so in your head about yourself, like the mental aspect. I do think that if it gets to a point where you're so uncomfortable in your body, so uncomfortable in your skin that you just want to hide, and it makes you not show up for the things that you're supposed to do, your responsibilities, then I take that as a sign of it's my responsibility, at least for myself, to change that thing that I'm not enjoying. But just because I feel like that is right for me does not necessarily mean I'm saying that other ways of being is wrong. I think we can all only do what we feel is right, and different people have different needs at different points of their life. And I had to come to terms with it. I am trying to say this conversation as gentle as possible. There has to be a balance, and there has to be the realization that many things could be true at once. We have to have our personal responsibilities versus our circumstances, because everything I talked about in the last segment, those were my circumstances. But ever since I recognized those circumstances, I recognized how it affected me. I recognized how it contribute to the way I see myself. It felt like my responsibility to do something about it if I really was that unhappy. And making lifestyle changes, even though it's going so slow and so gradually, just the fact I'm trying to do something just feels like enough. If you're the opposite, where you don't want to have anxiety of your body, because this is my truth. I tried to tell myself, like, being in a bigger body is okay. And I do still believe that. I still do believe it is possible. But if I was really that happy in that state, my personal state, then I wouldn't be so in my head when I'm around other people. I would be able to engage without my thoughts wandering or my attention wandering to how uncomfortable I feel. In truth, I'm always going to do what makes me feel secure in my skin. But I don't have to hate myself through it. I don't have to berate myself through it. And I do think that when people want to change themselves, I think that so many of us don't know how to do it in a way that doesn't feel like we're making ourselves the enemy, that we're hating on ourselves, and we have to thread the conversation lightly. And I also do think that people think that being harsh is the only way you do something. The reason you wanted to change in the first place was because of this or because of that. But getting to your root and getting to your truth will help you have an honest conversation with yourself and determine your own personal goals. And whether you want to stay the same, you want to make the changes, that's no one's business but your own. You know what is right to make you feel comfortable. You know what is right to really support your happiness and your vision of who you want to be. So that is just a reminder. And I wanted to end off by saying, don't let bad body image ruin your summer. Right now, the thing I'm most grateful for is a thought I have that just because I never have been doesn't mean I can't be, you know? And just because I've never been comfortable with my body doesn't mean I can't be it in future reference. I just think it's so important to look into yourself and think about things and truly connect with yourself to determine what is right for you. Allow yourself not to be all in your head about your body. Allow yourself to, yes, take care of it the best way you can, but look at what that even means for you as an individual. And what are your biggest, what are your biggest issues with it? And I don't mean like look wise. I mean, like, what do you feel about it? Like, why, what makes you feel negative about it? Is it really you? Is it really that it affects the way you are? Is it someone else, but you, if that person wasn't there, or if that person wasn't saying that, would you be happy with it? And getting honest about your feelings and your thoughts about it, and allowing yourself to have different types of thoughts about it and exploring them and exploring your emotions over it, I think is so important, because we should be experiencing each and every moment. This all is a personal choice, you know? I think as long as you're happy, as long as you're doing things, you're moving, even if it's gentle movement and just simply taking walks and cleaning and just getting up and doing something, it doesn't matter. Just don't let it ruin your summer. Experience it, be authentic with it, and honestly just be comfortable with you, and that's what matters. Be your friend. How would you treat a friend in this situation? Like, how would you help them through something that's hurtful for them or something they're struggling with? Why do you do that for someone else but not for you? And I'm just going to end it here, because I'm just going to end it here. And before I go, since I did mention what I'm grateful for in the process, so I'm just going to jump into the card pull of the episode. And actually, when I was doing this, 2 cards came out. So the first card is the turtle, which says, ancient soul, grounded, trusting, at home in the self. It is wonderful to be in the presence of a turtle personality. Like the beaver, the turtle has a strong relationship with the earth and water elements simultaneously. This helps to ground and connect them to the deeper truths of life, no matter where their travels lead them. Turtle energy is behind all great writers and storytellers as they collect life experiences under their shell for later use. The most potent turtle energy helps us close all other books and begin to tell our own true tale. When in balance, peaceful, adventurous, and productive. When out of balance, slows down to a halt to bring into balance an adventure. The second card that fell out was the butterfly, undergoing great change and transformation. The energy of the butterfly is with us during periods of transition. Since air is the element of the heart, this change usually involves relationships, or if you love your job, perhaps your career. Since transition is accompanied by some amount of discomfort, be extra patient and kind during this time, especially if the butterfly is you. Let solid friends and activities support you like a cocoon. Committing to one daily routine, a meal, practice, or prayer done at the same place and time will do wonders for lifting a butterfly spirit. When in balance, cheerful, graceful. When out of balance, fragile, frustrated. To bring into balance daily routine. I think both of these cards resonated very well because with the turtle one, it talks about being in home with yourself, while the butterfly talks about transition. And I think both of those are prominent things in this episode. We need to feel at home in our bodies. And if we do decide after consideration and after understanding our own feelings that we want to change something and that it's not attacking other people's way of being, that we can transition in a way that is gentle and kind. And I think that's the most important thing. And I'm just going to end off here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really did try my best to talk about it as gently as possible. If you can, please like the video. If you can, please don't forget to subscribe and follow the podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube. It would really mean the world to me. And of course, if you really enjoyed this, felt inspired by this, that it would mean so much for you to share. But that is all until next week. So have a good day, evening, or night. And just keep being the best you can be. So, yeah. Okay. That's all. Bye.